Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kimb.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a very special Market Mystics episode.
It's a little mixed up today.
I know, it's a little mixed up today. I know Kim and I say that often, but it's just because we are constantly in awe of what we get to do and who we get to share it with. And today is no different. We have some amazing friends of ours that are going to be joining the podcast. Should be pretty fun. But before we do that, Kim, what's going on in the markets?
Bitcoin is pretty steady. Looks like it's sitting at about 0.1% up over 24 hours, just over 0.5% up over 7 days, hanging out at 16,839. Ethereum's almost up 0.5% over 24 hours and up 2.5% over 7 days. That's progress. It's kind of probably one of the bigger movers over the last 7 days. Yeah. Sadly, there's just not been a lot of movement.
There's often not a lot of movement this week.
Well, that's good to know that not just everything, like that it's not just the cryptos that are flat. So biggest mover again is Luna Classic, which we've talked about too many times. But it's the number 45 coin. It's up just over 10% over 24 hours, which is the first time we've seen double-digit movement in 24 hours
in a
while. Yeah. At least when we've reported on it. That's one of the things we always talk about. So kudos to them. They're up 12% over 7 days. So that's a little steady, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, when I was looking through the charts, most everything was green, but very, very minor, like less than 1%, maybe 1 or 2%. But Luna Classic up 10% in 24 hours, like it was by far the biggest mover. I think the next closest was about 5 or 6%. So yeah, pretty significant little move right there. And
that's wild. And it's still only sitting at 1/100th of a penny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when I was looking at it, I was like, oh man, it's still way down there, but that's okay. It is doing something. So if you happen to be an opportunist and want to trade some volatility, Luna Classic has offered that. So
true. And if 2022 has shown us anything, it is that Luna can be volatile.
That's very true. Well, we've got, like we mentioned, we have some special guests today that are going to be joining us. Kim, do you have any thoughts to add before we jump in, or should we just jump into that?
I don't know. Just get ready for what we're like in real life. These are our real friends that we have real conversations like this with all the time. We talk about it, that Josh and I have conversations like this all the time as friends. But we have a whole group of friends and it's so helpful. I just have to say it's life-giving to me to have these conversations, just to be able to talk about something and not fight about it.
Yeah.
You know, like, can we talk about questioning things and figuring it out and spur one another on? So anyway, without further ado, here we go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special day after Christmas episode where we are joined by a bunch of our friends and we're just going to have a fun conversation. We don't really have a great plan, but we have a couple questions. We're just going to, have a conversation like we normally do. So sit back, enjoy the melodious voices of all of the Market Mystics friends.
I think we should probably introduce some people.
We should.
Okay, so I'm going to go around. I'm going to say your name. So say hello, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. I'm Kim. Hello.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Kim.
Next, we have Christine Smith. She's my sister.
Hey, what's up?
Awesome. We have Brandon Glenn.
Hello, everyone.
We have Paula Clewer.
Hello, hello.
We have Brie Aronson. I don't know if I said your last name
Hello.
right.
You did.
Yes. I'm sorry. You should say hello again.
Hello.
And Joshua, of course.
Hello.
Okay, so we had 3 questions that we kind of posed beforehand to try to get some direction to go. Where do we want to start, you guys?
Start with the first one.
Okay, first question posed by Paula. Do you want to talk about it? Or you want me to say it?
Say the question. 'Cause I don't know how you.
Do I have access to my knowledge on all other timelines? Or I am assuming this is part of the question. Do I have access to the knowledge that I have on other timelines?
Seems very like everything everywhere all at once, or even a little bit of like, I don't know if everyone's watched this, but I know Christine has like the AO, or even to some extent Loki. Like, I mean, many of the things where there are multiple timelines that a person is living, um, and some of those do like a really good job of like, oh, if in the other timeline I'm a mechanic, then now I know how to work on my car, like something like that. Or at least I have access to like trigger that part of my brain, because it's kind of like, um, I don't know if like shared consciousness or if it's one brain. Like, I don't know exactly how you would say that works, but something along those lines is kind of the point of the question, I think. So I'm curious, Paula, since you posed this question, what have been your thoughts or maybe experiences so far that like kind of made you curious about this?
Yeah, so I think as in like regards to accessing that other knowledge on other timelines, one, I think that there has to be some sort of permission from Father to access that. But even in that regards, like there's times where like I've just like known something, like I've studied it my whole life, and it's not something that I've ever actually like looked into. And also there's, I know that like, I've been to places in the spirit where like, libraries in essence, where like I have that stored knowledge that I'm able to like go and I look up, the different things. But it's what really got me like down that path was just, honestly, it was just one of those random thoughts that popped into my head. Like, if I die on another timeline, what happens to that knowledge? Does it get lost forever? Is it stored somewhere? Do I still have access to it? And I think like I do. It's one of those things where if the Father gives me permission to be able to access that, I can. There's also times where like I've just been sleeping in the middle of the night and waking up and I'm like, what am I doing on another timeline? Like, that's crazy right now. But yeah, I guess that's kind of my experience there.
I have so much to add to this.
Do it.
I get so excited about this stuff. Okay, so first of all, I think when it comes to accessing different timelines, not everyone does that. And so it's something that we do as either the Father leads, or, I mean, like you said, a lot of people access it in dreamland. When they're dreaming, they're engaging other timelines. So there are things like that. But to intentionally access the different knowledge, I think absolutely we can do that. because there's this collective consciousness as well as the quantum realm. And so everything that we have is stored in that place. And we can do that not just with our own timelines, but with other people's. And so sometimes when we're accessing that, we start engaging their timelines, which we wouldn't normally be a part of. And that's something that I know the Father has led me in a lot, is accessing other people's timelines to help redeem the times and to help kind of merge them back into the ultimate timeline. Because I believe that there's an ultimate timeline, and then there are all these little shoots off of that create these alternate timelines, if you will. And so the whole point, I think, is to merge them back to all being the ultimate timeline, which is I would say, maybe I am hopping forward, but is part of our ultimate scroll. Okay, so we have agreed to do this, but it's to merge everything back into this ultimate timeline, what it should be. And so we can do that by accessing different parts of the timelines, or different timelines that people have created, if that makes sense.
So would you say, because this is the second part of this question, is my scroll the same? So is my destiny, is my scroll the same on every timeline? Would you say yes? Because I tend to wonder if maybe no.
I think personally that there is kind of one overarching theme that is the same. That is kind of the main point, maybe. But then little parts, okay, because our scrolls even change all the time. And so it's not something that is just has been established only and then doesn't change. They're living, like scrolls are living beings, basically. And so parts of these things change on different timelines and what we should do or whatever. And it doesn't have to always be like, well, I missed it, so it's done. It can change for sure, but the overarching theme, I think, doesn't. That's part of who we are, is our scroll, you know.
This is a question for the group. How do you think multiple timelines are created?
I've had this theory ever since I don't know how old I was, single digits at least on this earth. And so it's very much every decision you make can branch off and create another timeline. Which, no matter how big or small it could be, turning right instead of left, or wearing the green shirt instead of the blue shirt, kind of thing. Do I think at some point they can kind of like go back together? Yeah, I do think they can. But do I think it's completely possible for there to be an infinite amount of timelines? Absolutely, I do.
Do you think that it's just based on the choices you make? Because I've also heard the theory that every choice you make, the other choice that was available creates a timeline where that option is lived out. Have any of you thought about that or experienced that?
Yes. I think that from my experience, I think that what you two are saying is kind of the same thing. And I don't know. At first, I thought that there were infinite possibilities, the same sort of thing with all these different branches of the timeline. But as the Father started showing me that part of our jobs as sons is redeeming the time and merging the timelines back, that it's not an infinite amount. Not every decision creates a different timeline, but certain decisions do. And I don't know what's what, to be honest. But I mean, Josh could do something that changes my timeline. You know what I mean? It's not only my decision, whatever it is. And there are times when if we go and we redeem something, generally it has been, at least from my experience, and this doesn't mean that it's the truth necessarily, it's just what I've experienced, so it's what I'm thinking is the truth. But it has been something kind of major that has been what a lot of people would call sin, that has shifted it into a different timeline. And so when I've gone to redeem times in different people's lives, it's almost always been to like save a life because someone's about to kill somebody or something like that. And so it's been something pretty drastic, not just like a right and left turn, like you were saying. Not saying that that isn't true. My experience has been that I'm not redeeming the right and left turns. I'm always like going to do something major to help that timeline get back in line with where it should be. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know.
I mean, isn't that kind of what we do when we minister now? I mean, when we go and minister to someone, like I've had experiences where I'm focusing on the Lord and then he sends me to someone I don't know in the spirit to go minister to them for something. I don't know. And I will say a lot of times I don't remember everything about it afterwards. It's like it's important in the moment, but I think it has to do with going and like influencing so that they go in the right direction, which is essentially kind of what you're talking about, going into these other timelines and doing it. It's just ministering in a different timeline, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know that is horribly different. This is what I wonder about the timeline thing, if I can say. So it was touched on in the beginning of the question, but we talked about like shared consciousness between timelines. So we've talked about shared consciousness among believers and even just having the mind of Christ, which is shared consciousness, right? And we talk a lot about oneness. We talk about oneness within ourselves, body, soul, spirit. We talk about oneness within the body, like the church body, the body of believers. And we talk about oneness with the Lord. But what about, I mean, and is this how we can access the shared consciousness between timelines, is if we become one with ourselves in a different timeline as well? You know what I mean? Like, is that how then you access those other timelines? You think about that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And that's essentially what she was doing. She was focusing on this other place. She got access to it, wound up seeing that other her as her actual self, right? So essentially became one. And then she's accessing all of that knowledge and ability from that timeline. What do you think about that?
My experience, I think in all of the timelines that I have spent any real amount of time on my own life, I should say, I think I already am functioning like myself. Just different aspects come out very much like that, but I don't feel like there's a time of discovering it's me or something. It's always it always feels like me. It's just I might look a little different, have a different job, different people, of course, but I still, like, for instance, have this deep minister kind of person even before. I don't believe it actually has anything to do with being a believer. I think it just is. I think that's how it is for everyone. I don't think that even the collective consciousness is just about being a believer. I think it just is. It's how we're created. And I can say that because all of this started before I was ever a believer. And that's how I've been functioning for a long time. I didn't understand it at all. I just was living a whole different life in a dream, but dreaming all the time and living a completely different life there, wondering like which one's actually real. I remember that starting a long time ago, and then eventually there are more alternate things, but I believe everything is connected. In the quantum realm, I think it's just physics. I don't think it has anything to do with just being a Christian, if you will. I think it really just is how everything is created. And so that's why I think you can, someone across the world who may not even be a believer will get the same idea as someone else. I think that that's because that's how we're created, and we're all connected whether we want to admit it or not. So I don't know. I think I veered from the question a bit, but that's kind of how I was thinking about it. I don't think that I don't know. I think that when we are connecting with ourselves and becoming one with ourselves, we do have a tendency to tap into other timelines easier. I think it's something that when we're like that, we start to discover more of who we really are. And so when we discover more of who we really are and we accept that, then we can, I think, have an easier time believing that's who we are in the other timelines, that's part of who we are too, and especially like for me, I always like the Lord has shown me this. I always call it the ultimate timeline. I don't know really what else to call it, but there's one timeline that is like the ideal one that I access. And I don't do it on purpose usually. Usually he's like just making me. Sometimes I ask and he'll let me, but it's just sometimes it's a little torturous, actually. I'll be honest. When you see this other ultimate timeline and it's not the one that you're in, then it's like, how do I get there? How do I, you kind of feel this like unfinished sort of way about yourself and about, your world and all of that. And so sometimes it does feel a little torturous. I'm like, Lord, why are you making me see this? I just, but I know it's good for us when we can do that. Then we can start to align more with who we really are in that timeline, I think. So, yeah, I don't know.
Kim and I talked a while back about kind of the idea of right and wrong, and that although there is like a Romans 8:28, like all things work out for good, that doesn't mean that in the first place there wasn't an optimal decision for you to make at that time. Like, so it's, one doesn't negate the other one from being true. And I have to wonder if like the ultimate timeline that you see isn't like the timeline where if everyone who influences your life made their ultimate or optimal decisions, like, and so I don't know like if continuing to make optimal decisions helps merge that back to that, or do you think the ultimate timeline sometimes can vary, like this is as good as it can get from the choices that have been made so far, or do you think that it can go like back to as if the optimal choices had been made all along?
I think your question totally negates the butterfly effect, which I don't know if you guys have looked into that, but it, talk about how thousands of monarch butterflies migrating changes our weather because they create a ripple that just keeps going and going and going. And I think the reality, as long as we are existing in a timeline, in time at the moment in this body, the butterfly effect really applies, because not only do your choices matter, like, and you getting to that optimal thing of should have chosen A over B, but every person around you's choices matter. You right now our roads outside are slick, and let's say somebody, has bald tires and just isn't thinking, is being careless and drives right into you. That totally changes your timeline, even though that choice had nothing to do with your choices. So you not only have your choices, you have other people's choices, you have angels and demons choices, you have spiritual beings choices, so many choices that all those things merge together. And personally, I see, there's the convergence of all of these things into what many in the traditional church would call the second coming, or whatever you want to call it. But the ultimate timeline is playing out, and all of these things are headed towards the same end goal ultimately, in my view.
I think that that's the beauty of free will is, I don't think, in my experience, Yahweh has never superseded my free will.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just like you were talking about, my choices impact other people. Like Brie and I being in a relationship, my choices impact her life. Her choices impact my life. All of us being friends, the way we interact with each other impacts each other's lives. And yeah, I think that that's really thought provoking. Because if we're talking about different timelines and everybody else's choices impact yours, I think that can get a little bit overwhelming at times. But I really don't think it needs to be. And I just had this thought, kind of the original question, do I have access to the knowledge that I have in other timelines? I would say yes, but even a step above that, and I know this has been touched on a little bit, but I do believe that we have the mind of Christ. I do believe there is a shared consciousness. And as Yahweh can lead me to access knowledge that I have in other timelines, I think he can lead me to have knowledge that other people have in other timelines, because ultimately I would argue that that's part of the same mind. It's all part of the same root.
Not only, though, is there the access to knowledge of other timelines, one of the things that I've been, I wouldn't say dabbling in, but experiencing recently is we currently exist in this state anyways, in a timeline. We have ancestral knowledge. And science is just beginning to start understanding this, and in the encoding and the DNA that makes up our bodies. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I can't remember which doctor it was, but they were specifically talking about people who had an organ transplant, and the person that they got the transplant from was a woodworker. And suddenly, after their transplant, they had never had the desire to woodwork, but just picked it up, started buying tools and making it happen. So we may have this access to other timelines, but we also have access to all the things the people before us, learned. And anyways, it's just a Pandora's box of awesomeness.
There's a few episodes ago, we interviewed a guy named Mark Wilburn, and he talked the whole time about legacy. And he made the comment, I do believe each individual has a purpose that they were on the earth for, but I also believe each family line has something they were made to carry. And so he was kind of talking about engaging that and figuring out, what is it that your DNA, what is your ancestral history, what was that supposed to bring forth into the earth? And even if it had never been touched on before, you can be the first one to start to bring that out. And I think that's really interesting. Brandon, you were talking about science and these people who aren't necessarily believers or mystics or whatever, kind of getting this information. It really seems like this legacy family something is being landed right now, and I would say that that's part of the collective consciousness that we have, is you're seeing this topic being addressed from many different things. But to tie that with the timeline stuff, when we take communion, we are taking the body and blood of Yeshua, we're taking on his DNA to change our DNA. And it's exactly like you're talking about with the woodworking thing. Like that's like the goal of taking communion, is actually to be transformed, to have your DNA be transformed. And I think that's really interesting, like that science is picking up on that this is possible. And it's something that the church has been practicing. I want to say majorly unconsciously practicing the same type of thing for thousands of years. It's just really fascinating to think about that.
And I think just going back to like the generational aspect of everything, there's a huge uptick right now of people working through and healing from generational traumas. And the amount of people who are saying, no, this ends with me, I think it's also going to lead to a point where it's going to lead them into a place of, well, what was my family here for? Like, my family is more than trauma. Like, that we're done with that. So I think like that's something that's also really interesting to kind of look at and think about.
It's interesting. I want to go back a little bit to, Brandon was talking about the butterfly effect and how that affects free will and all these different things, right? I'm just wondering, because to me, what that says is that there is no undoing it. And I would have to like super disagree with that. And the reason is, it's not that that stuff doesn't happen. I think that what you're saying is right. It does happen. But I do think that one of our whole purposes as sons is to access different timelines in the past and in the future, but especially I would say in the past, to redeem what has been done, to then change the trajectory of everything. And this is, I would say, like, I'll just be completely vulnerable, transparent. My scroll, I have a big mandate, and I know other people on this call do too, but I have a big mandate to insert myself, or have the Lord insert me, I don't know which, but on this part of the timeline, to try to redeem humanity and where they're going. And because this is a really big deal, what's happening. And there is supposed to be the redemption of all things, but it is up to choices. And so we were put here to try to redeem things and bring people back in line with everything, so we can advance as humanity instead of being destroyed. And we really need to take our place to be able to do that, and call everybody else to start coming to a higher level of engaging the collective consciousness, of being able to redeem the times and go back and change things, and recognize that we're not stuck in this one place and just have to see how it rolls out. Because we really have kind of a huge job for those who have awakened, which we have awakened, that we need to awaken more people, and we need to get everybody to start functioning like this, so that we can come to a higher level and start living like we're not idiots. I mean, our humanity has kind of gone so far down that we're acting like, oh, we're the best because we're in the age of technology, when we're like acting really stupid all the time. And so I know everyone's looking at me funny, but I think that that's kind of how it's happened. And we have to come to a much higher level, to where we are functioning more as a collective whole, and in a way that, I mean, that's why it's all about love. Like, I love your shirt, Paula. I don't know. Some people will watch this and see it, but can you tell them what it says?
Oh, it says, "You are so loved."
I think everything has to do with love. I think everything has to do with this massive amount of love that we can have as humanity, to be able to have that echad, that oneness, that unity, that, it's a big deal. We're supposed to be like our Lord, that we're supposed to be one, and we have just not been that way at all. And so if we can call each other higher to go redeem these things, and to actually get everyone else to start redeeming these things, because I can redeem stuff on different timelines, my entire life, and not be able to do enough, because it's not just me who's supposed to be doing that. And so we're all supposed to be doing that. And if we can all figure that out, and then ask, oh, how do I access another timeline? We need to ask the questions to be able to get to that place to do it, and then to be used by him to do it. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, because I feel like we don't have to stop at where it is. It's true that all of our choices have a ripple effect, and it starts like changing everything and all of that. But I don't believe that the ultimate timeline isn't achievable. I think it is achievable. And I know it is. I've seen where it's achievable. And so I know that that's true. And so for me, I'm like, no, there's going to be a merging of heaven and earth. We can do that. That's highly achievable. And it's so exciting to see that is something that we are on track for. But we got to stay the course, Anyway, I get way too passionate about these things.
Part of the opposite side of that butterfly effect discussion is the ripple that becomes the tsunami of one moment of obedience. And it's the little love tap from the Lord, and he tells you just to say one thing, and it totally changes the trajectory of someone's life. And not to get sidebarred or sidetracked, but I would just say that I have seen people that I mentioned one little thing to 20 years ago that forever changed their life. And I would never see that one little thing as significant, but it's just like this billboard and this highlight from the Lord of, don't doubt the faithfulness of the smallest thing.
That's so cool.
Oh, good. I love the hope infused into this conversation. I think it really matters here. And I feel curious, like one of the things religion taught me was that I understood what Jesus did. Like, yeah, he just died for my sins. Like everybody always presented it as just, there it is. Don't you get it? And one of the things in the last few years that I've discovered is I have no idea actually what he did, why it was important, and what it means to me, like what it matters. And so, Christine, when you were sharing about like redeeming the timeline and participating in that, it made me really curious. Like, what do you all think Yeshua actually did to the timeline? I think that's important. Like, do you guys have thoughts on that?
I love this question because I have to tell you, yesterday was Christmas, and I had a conversation that got real deep with some of my family and in-laws, and this was one of the questions that was posed then too. Like, what is it that Yeshua actually did? You know what I mean? Like, because we've been told by the church something for so long. So I'm curious. I had this conversation yesterday, but I'm really curious to know what everybody says too. I'm sorry. I'm just seconding or backing up your question.
I would like to hear Paula and Brandon's opinion, since you and Christine talked about it yesterday.
I didn't actually.
It was different family.
Yeah,
Oh,
different
okay.
family.
Never mind.
But it's
Wasn't that
okay.
Chris,
I've
though?
talked enough. I'm happy to let them talk, actually.
I would answer your question just simply in this way. In my view, in my seat on the bus, a timeless, infinite being stepped into a limited time spot. And, can we ever fully understand that? No, but it was a merging, a clashing of two separate systems that are now fully integrated, but yet both exist still. I don't know if that even makes sense.
My question is, aren't we the same? Aren't we infinite beings who have then stepped into a certain time and space? I feel like we each have had a very specific role, just like Yeshua did. And yeah, it's interesting though. It is interesting how we are even functioning like this,
I have to wonder, like, as Brandon mentioned, like a timeless infinite being stepping into this dimension. I heard a podcast a while back, and actually I think it was in the front seat of Brandon's car, of this person talking about trying to understand other dimensions, and how if you just think about like a 2D world that doesn't have height and everything exists on one plane. So you can see like circles or squares or whatever, but there's no height to anything. It's just all the same height. And how if a three-dimensional being like stuck their finger into that, the only thing you would perceive would be the circle of the finger being there, because you wouldn't know that there's something else connected to it because you don't have the grid to even know that that exists. And I think sometimes when we're trying to understand what exactly did Yeshua do, is the earth flat, all these other like weird questions, that we're trying to understand something that it has more dimensions than anything we know, or that we consciously know, because I think there's part of us that came from that place and so has the capacity to understand it. But we've been limited by what we've experienced here, and so it's like trying to have those conversations. Well, what really did he do? And it's like, I can answer it from the perspective that I've experienced, but I, at this point, don't have the capacity, or haven't unlocked the capacity to really understand what he did in a who knows how many dimensional space. Like, and I think that that's really like, it makes it hard because, like Brie mentioned, a lot of times we're told, oh, he died to forgive our sins. Well, he was forgiving sins before he died. So that wasn't he didn't have to die to forgive sins. So what was the part of that was, why was that significant? What did he do during that time? And when he came back, they didn't recognize him. And so it's like, he came back with a new body. And I know Christine and I have talked about this some, but like, I tend to think what he came to bring was access to the optimal timeline. Like, I think that to some degree he redeemed the capacity for us to go back there. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think in some regards too, I'm like thinking about like different things that scripture says that, he said while he was here. But the one verse that keeps popping up, and I think it's in Isaiah, where it's saying like, behold, I'm doing a new thing, do you not perceive it? And something that Yeshua said a lot to his disciples and to those that he was ministering to was like, do you not understand? Like, do you not get what I'm trying to say? And I think part of what he was doing here was, I guess, like educating is the best word, maybe, or like bringing that revelation of like, okay, you're only seeing this in 3D and through the 3 dimensions that you have, but I'm letting you know there are much greater dimensions than what you're trying to like understand what I'm saying in, if that makes sense. And then getting frustrated with them and being like, how long do I have to suffer you?
Kim, how did the conversation at the table go?
I don't know that there's any definite, like, solid answer that came out of it. I think, like with so many of these conversations, it really just makes you think and ponder, and you really have no choice but to go back to the Lord, right? What I came up with in the moment was, I think part of it was showing that death isn't the end. Like, Yeshua came and defeated death, but I don't think it was because there was this big thing to overcome. I think it was to show people, look, this is not the thing you're going toward. You know what I mean? I think we as people tend to get unfocused, and the stuff that's right in front of our nose is what we see. And we tend to not look beyond that. And I think that's a big part of what he did. But there was so much in this conversation that happened yesterday too. It was like, did he really come to save us from our sins? It's the same thing that you brought up came up yesterday. Like, he was already doing that before he died. He didn't have to die to do that. Did he come to allow the way back to the Father? Probably part of it. There's probably so much in it, but it's just the crucifixion part that I think that's kind of what was the big question. Like, well, why did he have to do that? Because he did so many other things, right? So that's really what it wound up with. It was just a lot of pondering. And I think, just like in this conversation, there are a lot of different, I don't know that any of this is like solid truth, 100%. You have to follow this. This must be it. But it is stuff to spur you on to think about it more, to dive into it, like to broaden the horizons, to form those new neural pathways, like we've talked about, renew your mind and really sort it out with your Creator and see, what does he have to say about it? What is he doing through you with this? All of those things. That's kind of where that conversation went.
It's awesome. It's cool. I love how your podcast brings everybody into a space to rethink and to seek the Lord more for how we're supposed to be transformed. You know, it really is the renewing of the mind that happens here. And so I just want to say thank you to Josh and Kim for letting this be a space for people. It's pretty exciting.
All right. Well, I just want to thank and honor our guests, Brie and Christine and Paula and Brandon, for joining us today. If you guys have been following us recently, we've been doing a lot of conversations with other people because we realize that we just want to know more of the puzzle, and we have to talk to other believers in order to learn more of the puzzle and to see how our piece fits into it. So I want to thank these people for joining us today. And I would love to have them back and just have wacky, weird conversations again at some point. So we have a group chat, and this is like the group chat. And so it's really just an extension of the weird stuff we talk about normally. But yeah, I just want to thank you guys for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.